Well, thank you very much, Fahim, and a very good morning, everyone. Absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for those words of welcome as well. Now, I want to start with a bit of disappointment, if I may, which is I'm not going to talk about packaging and printing. And that's mainly because I think you guys in this room know it all, and there's very little value I think I can add, because I have only come recently into the packaging industry. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of my experience leading businesses, right? So I'm going to tell you a few stories because I believe that people tend to take away a bit more from stories than from concepts itself. And then I'll try and draw out a few lessons that I have learned. This is not out of a management textbook. This is just practical experiences that I have picked up along the way. Now, how many of you have seen Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford? Very few. You guys need to get into YouTube and see this. It's an absolute must-see. And he talks of only 3 concepts in that commencement speech. He speaks about life, he speaks about death, and he speaks about connecting the dots. You know, and the thing that he says is it's very hard to connect the dots of your career going forward, planning your career going forward. But when you look back, you can connect the dots and really see what made you what you are. And that's really what I'm going to do. So, my first experience at general management was when I was asked to go as managing director for Unilever East Africa. Now, this was a business, by the way, of Unilever that had not grown for a decade and had lost money pretty much every single year. The regional president at that time, who also then came to Hindustan Lever, by the way, in India as CEO, a guy called Doug Bailey, he told me, Anand, this is our last chance. You turn this business around, or else we'll shut it down. Right? So no pressure at all. So I landed in Nairobi, where East Africa was headquartered, and realized, when I started speaking to the leadership team there, you know what I realized? I realized that everybody in that team was a victim. Everyone knows what a victim is, right? Everybody was a victim. They had happily externalized every problem and every issue. They had said, the economy sucks. The Indian competition and Indians, ethnic Indians who went from here 100 years ago to build the railway line, stayed on and run the industry in East Africa. They said the Indian competitors are all non-compliant. They don't do business the right way. Our regional office in Durban, in South Africa, doesn't give us the freedom. They don't understand our market and they don't give us the freedom to do what we need to do. Essentially, it was all about, I am okay, you are not okay. Every one of them had that mindset. Now, what do you do in that situation? I've come, an alien person from outside, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with East Africa, but one of the things I realized when I landed there is that Indians are disliked in East Africa. So I've arrived with my bag and baggage, and I first realized that nobody likes me in the company. And there is this victim mindset. So what do you do? So here's what I did. So next 3 months, I traveled across the length and breadth of the East African countries, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. I visited people's homes and talked to them. A lot of that was part of my training in sales and marketing. I sat with consumers who earned less than $2 a day and understood what are the trade-offs they make in life. Soon, I had actually covered more ground in those countries than many of the locals, by the way. I'd been to the length and breadth, including places where they say you will not come back alive in Nairobi. I said, I'm going. And I will go and sit in consumers' homes and talk to them. Once I did that for 3 months, I slowly started earning respect of the people there to say, hey, now this guy at least understands something about our country. He's not this foreign Indian who's come here telling us what to do. So based on my observations, we put together a simple ambition and strategy for that business. things like focusing on a few brands, right? There were home and personal care brands and food brands. Ensuring that every brand, power brand, had a low unit price pack. You know, the Indian sachet phenomenon, right? 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee. Right? If you're earning less than $2 a day, 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee works. You don't have the money to go to supermarket and buy a big jar of shampoo. And then a comprehensive program to lower cost. No disrespect to the Europeans, but the Europeans have advised the Africans what machines to buy. And I saw these fancy Italian machines that make Maseratis and Ferraris making Sunlight soap and Lifebuoy soap. Being an Indian, middle-class, frugal mindset, I said, hey, have you tried the Indian machines made in Ludhiana? Right? Or the Chinese machines? So we went after a comprehensive program to restructure the cost base of that business. And a lot of the learnings from my past experience from India. We unveiled that plan to the larger company and created a scorecard to ensure that everything we said that needs to be done is measured. So I introduced the red, amber, green, which people are familiar with. But amber is a hiding place, as I've learned in life. I used to be chairman of RCB at one time, by the way, the cricket team. But we're not discussing why RCB's performance is what it is today. However, what I did learn in sport is there is no amber. You win or lose. It is either red or it's green. All right? So we put that scorecard in place to measure what we wanted to get done. The business started turning around. Obviously, I'm fast-forwarding the entire story. But it started turning around. And at the end of the year, that business was delivering double-digit growth and turned profitable. But you know what is really the most rewarding thing for me is that this double-digit growth sustained for a decade thereafter. Right? And after that, I lost track of what they were doing. For a decade thereafter, even though I chose to leave Unilever at that time, at the end of 1 year. And you know why that happened? Because people had started believing in themselves and saying, I will take charge of my destiny and I will do what needs to be done. Right? That was the real shift that happened. So after a brief but super eventful 15 months in Nairobi, I landed back in Mumbai in November 2005 to join Cadbury as the managing director, initially for the Indian subcontinent, before I took over a larger regional responsibility. Now, how many people remember the infestation crisis here in this room? The Cadbury infestation crisis, worms coming out of Cadbury chocolate in 2003, 2004, right? Many people do, right? If you were really young, you wouldn't, because it was 2 decades ago. But the company did a great job at that time of resolving it. And packaging saved the day, hermetically sealed packaging with purity sealed stamp on the pack. Backed by Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, who just did the national anthem today, right? Bringing him on board as the brand ambassador. That magical combination of a tangible difference to the packaging and the endorsement of Amitabh Bachchan saying, I am personally assuring you, I've been to the factory, I've checked the quality standards, and it's safe to put into your child's mouth. Because this is a product you put into your child's mouth. What is the probability that you will buy it and put it in your child's mouth if it's going to have creepy crawlies coming out of it? Right? 0 chance. The business had tanked. But the management team, before I joined, had saved the day with these changes. And the business was just about coming back to 9-ish% growth when I arrived. And you know what? What I realized is that everybody in the company believed that double-digit growth was fantastic. And that was the best that could be done. Why? Well, it was a mature brand in a mature category. Cadbury's been around for 60 years. Mature brand, mature category. Double-digit growth is fantastic. You know, in 2005, and when I came back, I used to be watching India from Nairobi and saying, you know, there's a party going on in India at that time. And I landed back here and realized that somehow Cadbury was not invited to that party. The economy was opening up, but we were not celebrating. Our ambitions and our numbers were exactly the way they were over the past decades. So, what did we do? I felt we needed to grow much faster. Very few others in the company did. So I chose a few people from the team who I believed were kind of people who were aligning. And it's interesting, the people furthest away from having to achieve the target are the most bullish about the targets. If you're the sales guy, you'll say, "Arey Baba, it's not going to happen." If you're the HR person, you'll say, "Absolutely, we must go for bigger numbers and bigger targets." Okay? So I got a few people together who were a little distant from the front and put a plan together, an ambition with very little science of saying we will grow by 20% till 2010 for 5 years. 20% per annum till 2010. Most people felt we were absolutely stupid. You know what people say? This guy doesn't understand the business. He's just arrived. He has no idea that this is possible. This is not possible. We will fail. We underpinned that ambition with obviously a strategy of focus. We killed a third of the brands. In my first year, I killed more brands in Cadbury than we gave birth to. And you know, killing a brand is like killing the child of a brand manager. Huh? Make no mistake. It's a bloody hard thing to do. It's an emotional decision. It is not a rational decision. But we killed a third of the brands, half the number of SKUs in that company, half the number of innovations on an innovation pipeline. Halved. Growth started improving. And the naysayers slowly started coming onto the ship because everyone wants to be part of a ship that's sailing. Nobody wants to be part of a ship that's sinking. We also focused on just one or two real innovations and really bet the bank on those innovations. And the two innovations that came out at that time were Cadbury Dairy Milk Silk, which is a multi-thousand crore brand today, and Oreo. I'm sure you heard of those brands, right? Both those brands were launched during that time. Over 8 years, that business delivered a CAGR of almost 25% top line and 25% bottom line. Yeah? We ran out of capacity. The organization couldn't support that kind of growth. People are huffing and puffing. But it confirmed the philosophy that less is more, and more is actually less. If I had to do this again, I would have aimed for 30%, right? But who was to know? In July 2013, Diageo took control of United Spirits, right? And a lot has been written about in the media. Dr. Malia was the chairman of the company at that time. It was a listed company, turnover about 10,000 crores and paying taxes of nearly 30,000 crores a year. I was approached to lead the integrated USL and Diageo business in India. Right, one side somebody would say, wow, what a fantastic opportunity. But you know what? I got cold feet. Why? Well, the liquor industry has a tainted reputation in India. And I actually told them in the town hall, my first town hall, I said, my mother had been alive. And I told her this, she would have said, "Kyun beta? Aur kuch nahi mila karne ko? Daru bechna hai." But then on the other side, you know, and this is a category that actually a lot of people will speak badly about in the day, but will quietly come home to the category in the evening. Huh? So, but on the other side, there was Diageo, a great company, great values and reputation, and an industry that had really low per capita consumption. So I felt it was one of the biggest and most exciting opportunities in the larger consumer goods space in India. So I took the plunge and I took on the challenge. But you know what? It was a far bigger challenge than anything I imagined. And Dr. Malia was chairman when I was the managing director and CEO for the first 2.5 years. Okay? And it's another story of how the board meetings went. Okay? But what we did is we had to really clean up that business. A host of legacy issues came up. I don't know how many of you have listed companies and have had audits, but the number of qualifications we had was probably longer than the rest of the report, right, in our audit report. All of that had to be sorted. But in parallel to that, we started sowing the seeds to set that business in order. We had 150 brands in Diageo at that time, so we focused on a few of them with sharper positioning and sharper advertising. Put an innovation structure in place to create excitement in a category that actually whiskey has been boring. You enjoy it when you drink it, but the category itself had little innovation and little excitement. We changed the sales strategy from push to pull. It's a media dark industry technically, right? Everybody sells glasses and soda. But technically, it's a media dark industry. So your shop has to be your television screen. You need to build your brand in the store, right? And a lot of point-of-sale materials and attractive packaging actually helps you to build that brand equity. We transformed the cost base of that business. We had 94 factories when I started. I ended with 47, exactly half. We invested in ethical marketing. I actually killed a brand called McDowell's Diet whiskey because I said I will not allow unethical marketing to happen because people are believing that if I drink more of this, I will lose weight. I don't know how many of you remember the London Pilsner, London Diet advertising campaign. To call it diet and say you will actually, it is a diet thing and you will lose weight, actually is pushing the truth a bit too far, right? So we actually killed that brand, multi-million case brand, we said we won't do it. And we invested in road safety and corporate citizenship. And the organization got transformed into the structure, ways of working, and culture. Halved the number of white-collar employees in that company. And really went after inclusion and diversity. And I think we can do better with the diversity, particularly gender diversity in this hall today. But Diageo today has more than half its leadership team as women and 1/3 of the top 50 as women. In an industry that is an alcohol industry where you would think it is the hardest to get women to come and work. And I was giving a talk in some engineering companies recently, and I said, if it's done in alcohol, you can do it anywhere. Right? You can bring in far more inclusion and diversity. So, and possibly most importantly, we changed the way business is done in the industry. A lot of people told me, Anand, ye nahi ho sakta hai. Ye dhanda band ho jayega. Because, you know, alcohol is a state-based subject in India. Huh? It's highly complicated. Right? It's 30 countries. It's not one country running alcohol in India. Every state is completely different. And people said, you cannot do it well. All I can tell you is that we are still standing here to tell that tale of what happened. So really my time in Diageo or United Spirits was spent constructing the runway and repairing the engine so that that plane could take off one day. Right? That was really what we did. And finally, a word on EPL. That's where I currently work. Completely different from anything I've done. EPL is a rare example, I have to say, of a non-IT multinational from India, right? And as Fahim introduced, with plants around the world, and the most recent one being a plant we've set up in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I joined in August 21, and pretty much from the day I joined, I encountered the crisis on commodities, on supply chain, on energy, on wages. I mean, we had 40% wage inflation in Germany, by the way, post-COVID. 40%. Which customer is going to give you 40% price increase overnight, right? You guys are all in B2B businesses. You know how hard that is. So we had to focus on cost and ensuring that customers are served. And I said, doesn't matter what happens to cost, but let's just make sure we control what cost we can, but serve customers well. And my job was to provide leadership and inspiration during that tough time and keep people motivated and inspired. That was really my role. Like I said, I'm not an expert in packaging at all. So we set up this vision aiming to be the most sustainable packaging company in the world. We never said we want to be the biggest. We never said we want to be the most profitable, but the most sustainable packaging company in the world. And you know, we're in plastics. Plastics is a bad word in many parts of the world, right? Like alcohol. But you can do it responsibly. I think that's the real question, okay? And today I believe that the business is well on its way on that journey, building on the rich legacy that the promoters built. And I have to say, it's an outstanding company that the promoters built. We have recovered from the crisis, more than recovered from the crisis, and now expanded our presence, right, to even more countries around the world. So those are my experiences, really, or lessons that are there from my experiences of turning around a business in East Africa, accelerating growth of a company, Cadbury, already doing quite well, transforming a company like United Spirits, and finally, operating in a business completely outside my comfort zone, a business I knew very, very little about. So those are the stories really of what I've been doing, in terms of my career. I'm going to draw out 5 lessons quickly from that. The first lesson, setting the right ambition. Ambition is the starting point of anything. And this is one of the most important decisions leaders must make and the leadership team must make. After all, it's ambition that drives everything. If you plan to grow at 5%, then you take certain decisions. If you plan to grow at 20%, you take quite different decisions. Ambition is the starting point. But then why is it so difficult? It's so difficult because ambition is the marriage of science and data of the past and a dream and a vision of where you want to go. If you set your ambition too high, you set yourself up for failure. If you set it too low, you leave money on the table. And that's what happened in the case of Cadbury. The second is the power of focus. How many people do you know who reach international level in more than one sport? Perfection requires focus. It requires mastery. It requires huge time and attention. And there's no time to do more than one. And this is really, the power of focus is the most important lesson I really did not learn at management school, by the way. Because what you tell your people to do is what gets done. If you tell them to do stuff that keeps them busy but makes no difference to the business, that's what they will do. But if you get them to focus on things that will transform your business, then that's what they will do. Management time is the most important resource we normally have in a company or people's resource. Very often we think it's capex or capacity. It's people's time, management time, right? And I don't know if we spend enough time really thinking about what we need to do. But you need to choose your battles in business and in life, right? I think there's a good reason why people nowadays have only a few children, not a dozen. Huh? It's the power of focus, right? It's really hard to focus on a dozen. You probably won't even remember all the names if you had a dozen. So doing a few things is so much more impactful than doing many small things, okay? Because the latter only keeps you busy. The former transforms the business. The third is we make growth happen. That's my lesson from Africa. Some of the world's greatest companies were born during recessions, by the way. It's easy to externalize your performance when the times are tough. And I've seen this with the smartest people working through my career. When the numbers are good, they'll say, I have done all these great things. When the numbers are bad, the environment is bad, the GDP is bad, there's a supply chain challenge, externalize everything. So you internalize the credit. As they say, success has 1,000 fathers, failures have none. Everyone says, hey, this is your problem, right? It's not because of me. When I joined Cadbury, I asked them to do a correlation of GDP versus company growth. Guess what the correlation was? Minus 0.9. Negatively correlated. Then when we went into the analysis, we realized that 2/3 of performance is determined by what we do. Quality of advertising, quality of innovation, quality of distribution, quality of visibility in the marketplace. Only 1/3 is dependent on personal household income and therefore the economy. So you can truly take charge of your destiny. And therefore, this whole thinking about never be a victim, focus on your circle of control, not your circle of concern. On your circle of control. The fourth is that culture drives performance, not the other way around. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard about culture eats strategy for breakfast. Anyone's heard that line? Yeah? And I've seen it in action. Okay? I mean, when the Cadbury crisis happened, before my time, nobody jumped ship. Everyone said, yeah, this is my company. We used to say in Cadbury, we have purple blood running in our veins. This is my company. I can't leave. I have to stay and fix it and be part of the solution. Only culture can do that. I don't know how many of you have read the case study, Harvard case study, on what happened on the night of 26/11 at the Taj. Some of my colleagues from Unilever were there that night. And you know, the staff of Taj put service ahead of life to keep those people served that night. And, sir, can I get you wine? These people didn't have a restroom to use. They were locked in a room. And they were going behind a curtain because there was no choice. But the staff was there, putting service ahead of life. Do you think salary can do that? Culture can do that. And you know, when you are done, people will forget the numbers. When you are done, and one day we'll all be done, I'm closer to being done than many of you. But they'll only remember how you touched them, how you made them feel, and the culture that you left behind, because that's living and breathing and stays on after you. And finally, a word about absolutely play to win, but win the right way. I'm happy to take on a fight with anybody who plays to the rules. You know, I just cannot emphasize how important this is, particularly in India, right? And every time I stand up, I have to talk about winning, but winning the right way. It's what I grew up with very middle-class values in a middle-class but honest, hardworking home, and what I was trained in Hindustan Lever as well, about doing business the right way, yeah? You know, to me, businesses have to be managed not just through vision and strategy, which is what the gurus will tell you, but by conscience. You know what is conscience? Who doesn't have a conscience? This is that inner voice that tells you, mat karo, galat hai. It's wrong. Everybody has that inner voice. I do too. And my inner voice is actually very loud. So I believe that when I manage a business, I manage it through conscience. And that forces me to stay and do the right thing. All right? So folks, that's my story about my experiences and 5 lessons that I have drawn from that. I hope you found it useful. Huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd request Sanjay Patel to please come up on stage to honor Anandji with a small memento from our side.
Thank you. Oh, not at all. Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Can we have the podium removed, please? Big round of applause, please.